On my coffee table sits a photograph that strangers call perfect. I'm barefoot on a stone terrace, veil lifted by sea wind, mouth open like I'm laughing when I was trying not to cry. Daniel holds my waist. His eyes are soft, almost startled, as if love surprised him mid-breath. In the frame's corner, a little gold key tag glints, 407. Everyone says the light is beautiful. I know it's a warning. The perfect family snapshot is simple. A small wedding by the water 2 summers later, my parents smiling with lines I gave them, Daniel's sister passing out paper fans because the air was heavy, our nephew asleep in a stroller with one sock missing. No choreographed dances, no speeches, just grilled fish, blue hydrangeas, and silver forks clinking against plates. The crack comes in a quiet detail no one else noticed. A guest leaned too close and said, "You're lucky, first husbands teach us what to avoid." She laughed at her own meanness. I smiled because my therapist taught me to survive careless tongues. Daniel squeezed my fingers under the table. He felt me stiffen. Salt mist clung to my arms. The hydrangeas smelled faintly like wet paper. In the distance, a bell buoy kept knocking the same hollow note. My skin cooled where Daniel's thumb moved. The past shifted, slow as a tide pulling back to show the sharp rocks. I kept staring at the key tag on the table and thinking of another door, another night, another sound behind it, and wondering why I'd kept that brass tag at all. 2 years earlier, I had married Julian in a glasshouse hotel that pretended to be a palace. The ceremony took place at 4 on a Saturday under strings of bulbs. My best friend Laura pinned my hair and said, "Don't cry, mascara hates sincerity." We laughed and then she pressed her cheek against mine and whispered, "You're my favorite person, don't forget me now that you'll be married." I thought she was joking. I said, "You're not that easy to forget." The first flashback is his mother at the rehearsal dinner. She touched Julian's face like he was still 6 and said, "We're so proud of our boy." Then she turned to me, "You're very organized, he needs that." I raised my glass. Laura raised hers too and mouthed, "Breathe." The roast salmon smelled lemon bright. The waiters moved in a slick pattern. Julian texted under the table, his phone face down, his thumb quick, a new tell I hadn't learned to fear yet. The second flashback is smaller. A week before the wedding, Laura and I walked past the carousel by the river. The horses were chipped and lacquered, the winter wind smelled like iron. She tugged my elbow toward the gate and said we should ride. "It'll be our last spin before you become Mrs. Grown-Up," she said. I fed the machine 2 quarters. We chose 2 horses side by side that rose and fell out of rhythm. "We should invent an emergency word," Laura said over the calliope music. "In case you need rescuing from boring married life." I said honeysuckle because I had just bought a perfume I thought Julian liked. Laura grinned too long. "Honeysuckle is perfect," she said. The power imbalance showed up later in our apartment with the broken radiator. Julian came home late and found me in socks and a sweater wrapping invitations. "You look intense," he said, dropping his keys. I asked if he could email the photographer about the ceremony timing. He leaned against the fridge. "You know you're better at details," he said. "Just do your magic." Laura arrived with chili in a Tupperware, banging on the door with her knee. "I saved you," she said. She fed him while I finished our to-do list. He kissed her cheek and called her a saint. His kiss to me was an afterthought, warm but distracted. I opened the window a little to release the smell of cumin. The street air was damp. Somewhere a siren wailed and cut off quickly like someone had folded it in half. The symbolic thing was small, cheap even. The brass key tag the night manager gave me when he upgraded our bridal suite. He slipped it into my palm like a secret, heavy and warm from his pocket. "Room 407, he said. "Congratulations," Laura laughed. "We're living large," she said. I put the tag in my clutch. I can still feel its edges against my finger bones, a pressure I kept telling myself was luck. The reveal was Laura's gift that afternoon. It was a perfume roller labeled honeysuckle with my initials pressed in gold. "For your first night," she said, rolling it along my wrist. "He'll never forget this smell." She lifted my hand to her face and inhaled with her eyes closed. When she opened them, she smiled too slowly. It was then I realized the word belonged to her too. Now in my kitchen with the photograph and the key tag and Daniel making tea, I have a clear task. It's the night before our city hall appointment to finalize the house deed in both our names. I'm writing a letter I have avoided writing for 2 years. It's for my younger cousin who is engaged and thinks my life rewrote itself without blood or paperwork. She believes in clean breaks. I owe her the messy truth. The stakes arrive with a knock at 8:30. The envelope is fat, no return address, my name written like the writer was shaking. Inside is a stack, a hotel bill, 2 photocopied notes, a printed email thread, and a glossy photograph from behind that shows 2 people in a hallway. The brass key tag is in the bottom of the envelope, cold against my palm. It's my tag, it should be in my drawer. The note on top says, "You never asked for proof, I decided you should have it." I start to type the letter and stop. The smell of Earl Grey fills the room. The steam fogs the window, softening the city lights. Daniel sets my cup on the table and doesn't look at the papers. He has a rule, he looks when I ask. "What is it?" he says. "A guest," I say. The confrontation begins with a phone call I don't expect. It's Julian. He hasn't called in a year. His voice is a careful mix of casual and urgent. "I heard the deed is tomorrow," he says. "I have something you should know." I laugh into my hand so I won't say the thing that will poison me. He says, "It's about Laura." I say, "Everything is about Laura." He starts to explain and then stops. The door buzzer cuts him off. Daniel moves to answer. The last time I heard Julian breathe this fast was our wedding night. I hang up without a word. The buzzer sounds again, longer this time. The air feels colder. What else could possibly be inside that envelope? I make a choice I can't undo. I tell Daniel to let the visitor up, and I tell myself if it's Laura, I won't run. The trigger event is a double echo. The visitor is not Laura, it's the night manager from that hotel, older now, in a gray peacoat that smells like rain. He stands just inside our door with his hat in his hands. I shouldn't be here, he says, but I kept something for too long. He glances at Daniel, at my walls, at the photograph on the table where the key tag gleams. He says, I thought you might want your story to be yours. The physical memory comes like a flood. The night of the wedding had tasted like champagne and powder sugar. After the dancing, after the photos, after the toast where my father's voice shook, I followed Julian to the bridal suite. He stopped in the doorway, smiled without teeth, touched my cheek with the back of his fingers and said, I'm exhausted. Can I shower alone? I feel sticky. I laughed. I can help, I said. He pulled back, quick. Give me 10, he said. He kissed my forehead. The shower roared behind the wall. I pressed my palm to the door. It was warm. It wasn't warm for long. The next hour stretched like gum. I dozed in the chair by the window, veil pooled on the floor, the honeysuckle scent rising from my wrist. I woke to sound, a word maybe, a hush. The hallway carried voices like a river carries silt. I slid my feet into my satin shoes. The carpet was thick, grainy under the sole. I opened our door into a corridor that smelled like old ice. A sliver of light burned under a door I thought was a service closet. It was room 412, I learned later. The knob on 412 brushed my knuckles, warm again. I knocked once, the voices fell, a breath. Then Laura laughed, soft and helpless. Someone said SHH. I pushed the door open and walked into a room that rearranged my life. There was steam, more than a shower makes. There were champagne glasses on the nightstand, one with a lip print the color of heatwave, the lipstick Laura always joked could survive an apocalypse. There were clothes on the chair, a tuxedo jacket turned inside out. And there were two people sitting up in tangled sheets, eyes caught like deer, hands reaching for nothing. What are you doing? I said. My voice sounded like someone had packed it in cotton. Julian reached for words. It's not what you think, he said. Laura's throat worked. We just needed to talk, she said. I said, you're naked. She pulled the sheet higher like I was being unreasonable. We're drunk, she said. Julian said, I was going to tell you not tonight. I didn't want to ruin. I started laughing. It came out like barking. You did this on our wedding night, I said. My hands shook. I dropped my phone and it bounced on the rug and stopped at the foot of the bed. The screen glowed. The voice memo app had started recording when it hit. A witness came in accidentally then. The housekeeper on the night shift rolled her cart past the open door and froze. Her hand flew to her mouth. I'm sorry, she said. Her eyes snapped to the bed, then to my face. Do you need help? She said. She reached and took my elbow as if I were stepping off a curb I hadn't seen. Concrete evidence fell into place over the next hour because the night manager was kind, or because he had a sister, or because he believed women when they said no. He printed the keycard log that showed Julian's card opened 412 at 1:06 a.m., 1:09 a.m., and 1:12 a.m. He handed me a receipt for a half bottle of champagne charged to 412 at 12:58 a.m., signature in Julian's looping hand. The housekeeper quietly handed me a folded napkin. Inside was a lipstick tube. Heatwave. The undeniable proof came when I hit play on my phone. The recording captured Laura saying she'll forgive us, she needs us, and Julian answering, not tonight. Then there was the sound of a kiss, clear as a slap. The hospital was bright like a lie. The waiting room chairs were a slick orange vinyl that stuck to my thighs. The air smelled like bleach and machine breath. The night manager had called a car. The housekeeper had pressed cold water into my hand. Laura had stood in the doorway with the sheet clutched to her chest. Julian had been speaking in fragments. It was stupid. I was scared. We were friends first. I couldn't feel my fingers. The shining edges of the brass key tag kept flashing inside my head like sunlight through blinds. A doctor with square glasses and a voice like a metronome told me the facts. Your blood pressure is high, your oxygen dipped when you fainted, you've hyperventilated. He held a clipboard with my name spelled right. I can give you something to help you breathe. A nurse with a sailor tattoo on his wrist took my pulse. It hammered under my skin like a bird's wing. We're going to keep you for a few hours, the doctor said. The fluorescent bulbs hummed. I closed my eyes and saw the hotel hallway again. The crosscheck came from simple, boring time. The EKG showed I had passed out at 1:28 a.m. The hotel bill stamped the champagne at 12:58. The keycard log showed the room opening 3 times after. Julian had told me he went to smoke in the courtyard at 1 alone to calm his head. Laura had said she was looking for me. The concierge later confirmed she had asked for extra towels for 412 at 12:45. The truth wrapped itself tighter than any story they could tell. Someone lied, someone protected, someone cracked. Julian's mother arrived at the hospital at 3 with a coat thrown over her pajamas. She touched my forehead like I was fevered. Men make mistakes, she said into my hair. Laura's older sister called my phone from an unknown number and said, don't do anything dramatic. Daniel didn't exist yet, but I remember thinking how strange it was to be alone while so many voices crowded me. At dawn, the housekeeper called again. He's walking the corridor, she said. He's knocking on doors. In the next breath, her voice broke. I'm sorry I didn't stop them. I told her it wasn't her job to stop adults, and in saying that I understood it was my job to end this. The document that pointed to one person was tucked almost apologetically into the hospital discharge packet. The night manager had slipped it in before he left. A copy of the incident log he'd written at 2:10 a.m. It was official, dull, stamped with the hotel's crest. It stated, guest J. Harrow admitted to room 412 with guest L. Kane at 1:06 a.m. after marital suite occupant spouse witnessed entry. Complaint registered by spouse. I underlined the last three words with the nurse's pen. I belong to myself again. An ally flipped. My father, who had always taught me to be polite and spare people a scene, walked into the hotel breakfast room at 9 with his shoulders back and his tie knotted wrong and took my side out loud where everyone could hear. He stood by the juice carafe, cleared his throat, and said to the families, "There's no brunch today. My daughter's husband slept with the maid of honor last night. They will not be joining us." He reached for my hand and squeezed like he was pulling me back from a ledge. I hadn't asked him to do it. He did it anyway. Sometimes love is clumsy and perfect. The private confrontation happened upstairs. I had showered at the hospital and returned to the hotel because my dress and shoes and grandmother's earrings were there. Laura was waiting outside the suite in leggings and a sweater, her hair scraped back, her face pale under a coat of foundation. "We're soulmates," she said before I could speak. "We tried to fight it. It was always us." I laughed until I couldn't breathe again. "Soulmates are cowards then." She reached for my arm. I stepped back. "Just admit you knew," she said. "You always knew." I thought of the carousel, the word honeysuckle on her tongue, the key tag heavy in my fist. "I didn't know," I said. "I believed you." The moral dilemma was simple and ugly. Do I keep this inside and protect our families from gossip, or do I say the thing that will stain every photo and every holiday menu for years? The cost of silence was a life with a man who had chosen my best friend over me within hours of our vows. The cost of truth was everything else. Julian knocked on the door then, his tie missing, his eyes blown wide. "We can fix this," he said. "We'll do therapy, we'll take a honeymoon, we'll never see Laura again." Laura flinched like he'd slapped her. "You said," she started. He shot her a look. Power shifted in the air like a storm moving in. The real-world consequence landed fast. The hotel refunded my parents without being asked. Laura's boss, who had attended our wedding because we ran in tight circles, heard what happened and told her to take a leave. Julian's firm sent an email that said, "Take the week, no chargeable hours." I called my jeweler. "Do you do buybacks?" I asked. He was quiet. "Sometimes," he said. "I'll make it work." I took off my ring. It left a paler band of skin that looked like almost healed frosting. The decision that triggered the finale was an email I wrote at noon. Subject line, annulment. I CC'd both families and our efficient, who had the legal paperwork in his briefcase. The body read, "I discovered my husband and the maid of honor together last night in room 412. I am ending the marriage. Please respect that I will not speak privately about this with anyone but my attorney." I sent it and then I turned off my phone. The practical steps were not cinematic. I hired a lawyer named Paya who wore gray sweaters and bright lipstick and said, "The faster we move, the cleaner this will be." We filed for annulment based on fraud. It went through in 6 weeks because the evidence was thick and the witnesses were reluctant but clear. I returned the wedding gifts with a card that said, "Thank you. Circumstances have changed." I canceled our lease and moved into a studio with a fire escape that ran hot in summer. I did therapy twice a week. I learned that my body stored panic in my throat and my calves. I learned to unclench. Accountability found each person in their own mirror. Julian texted at first, long explanations that read like essays. "I was grieving the loss of freedom," he wrote. Marriage pressed a panic button. He wrote, "Laura is not who I thought," which made me both sick and vindicated. He wrote, "I love you, I made a mistake." I blocked him. He emailed from a different address. He sent flowers, I left them on the curb. Laura went quiet after an initial onslaught of messages that ranged from seduction to apology to rage. "You stole him," I sent once, surprising myself. She replied, "He was never yours," and I knew we were done in a way that had nothing to do with men. My father invited the night manager to dinner a month later. He brought his wife. We ate roast chicken and told stories that didn't hurt, and then he slid the brass key tag across the table. "For you," he said, "no curse, just metal." I kept it. Ugh. The scar is still physical. Honeysuckle turns my stomach. Even in a garden on a clean morning, the sweetness slides too fast into rot and my skin pebbles like I've walked into a draft. I learned to check hotel room numbers without looking like I was checking. I do not sit with my back to the door anymore. I carry my own keycard and a brass tag that is mine, scratched, not shiny, weight enough to anchor a pocket. Years later, I met Daniel at a vendor fair where I was selling candles I'd made in my kitchen because I had quit my job to build something that smelled like choices. He bought 3 and asked me why one was called Spill. "Because life spills," I said. He smiled like he recognized me. He came back the next week for 4 more. He talked about long walks and quiet even in the city. He never made a promise when he could make a plan. When he kissed me the first time, he asked, "Is this okay?" I nodded. He kissed me like we had time. He was right. Julian tried to return. He appeared outside my store one autumn wearing a jacket that belonged to a wetter city and said, "I'm sorry, I've changed." We stood under the awning while a drizzle turned the streetlights into halos. What would you like? I said. Another wedding night? He winced. I deserve that, he said. He looked past me into the shelves of glass, the handwritten labels. You look happy, he said. I hope you are. I waited for the ache. It didn't arrive. I am, I said. We're done. He nodded and left. I watched him walk away and felt calm fill my ribs like a tide coming in on schedule. Laura's story unraveled without my help. Friends told me she dated a man who broke her things, then another who was never home, then another who took photos of their dinners and her legs and disappeared. I felt sorry for her the way I feel sorry for stray dogs who look at you like you on the weather. That pity felt clean. It didn't ask anything back. I let it exist and then I let it go. Now I live with Daniel in a place with a small yard and a stubborn fig tree and a tiny room where I keep jars and wicks and the ledger that proves to me I can make a life with my hands. Most nights we cook. He stirs while I chop. Music low, windows open. The air smells like garlic and whatever the neighbors are burning and sometimes rain. Once a week we walk to the river and sit where we can hear the carousel. The calliope music reaches us in broken pieces. I keep the brass key tag on my key ring. It no longer glints, it just is. What I learned is not a lesson so much as a map. Real love begins at the border you draw around yourself and patrol with kindness. It feels like heat where a hand meets the back of your neck and like silence where laughter can live. It does not arrive with speeches or fireworks. It shows up with groceries on time. It says, I'll do the dishes and means it. It asks, is this okay? And stays to hear the answer. When it leaves the room, it does not take your air with it. What would you have done in my place? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.